Who inspires you? Your mother? Your child? Inspiration comes in many forms, and at WBGU-TV, you inspire us to bring entertaining and educational programming to our region. Get inspired, stay inspired.
My name is Baker O'Brien, and this is the Labino Studio. And the Labino Studio was built originally in 1963 after the glass workshops. So in the early 60s, there was a man named Harvey Littleton who was a ceramics professor at Madison, Wisconsin. But Harvey had grown up in Corning, New York, and his father worked for Corning Glassworks. And his father was Jesse Littleton, who invented Pyrex. Harvey became a ceramics professor at Madison, and he had the idea that if a potter could have a little kiln in the backyard, why couldn't you have a glass furnace in your garage? So he actually had the permission of Otto Whitman, who was then the director of the Toledo Museum, to do workshops at the Toledo Museum. Apparently there was some funding, and so they got it. He went to build a glass furnace and found out that a glass furnace is quite a bit different than a kiln, a ceramics kiln. So they called Dominick Labino, who was then the vice president and director of research and development at Johns Manville, and he was a hobbyist, at heart, as well as a brilliant scientist, and he brought everything they needed to build a glass furnace down to the museum, and the workshops became then successful. They had glass the next day. The glass thing really took off after that point. Harvey took it back to Madison, took the furnace back, and started blowing glass there, and now there's a glass program everywhere. Until the time where they had the workshops at the Toledo Museum, all the glass, it was made in factories and designed by the guys in the white shirts and pencil ties, and then they would take the drawing down to the floor, and then the guys would make the work. After the 1960s, in fact it was 1962 at the Toledo Museum, these landmark workshops actually happened in Toledo. I mean, this was very important, and we just had a huge recent celebration of 50 years from the studio workshops. We had a huge international conference come into town, and it was a big deal. So Toledo is very, very important in that way. So what Dominic Labino did was he took early retirement to pursue glassblowing because he was so fascinated with the whole idea. What he did that's different is he made glass from scratch, which is what I learned from him. So we mix and melt colored glass with the color already in the glass, as opposed to the way that 99% of studios work, is they melt colorless glass and then they buy their colors, and the color becomes like a veneer. They either put a chunk on or they roll it in frit, and the color isn't in the glass. They start with clear. The only reason that I was allowed to come here is because I didn't want to blow glass. I was actually a metals person, and I wanted to do metal. I was an Antioch College student, and it's a co-op program, and I was told that I needed to go get a job for 3 months before I came back to school. And I always joke I'm on Antioch College's world's longest co-op job, because I'm still on my co-op job from 1975. They took an interest in me and what I was doing because I didn't want to blow glass. So that's how, who knew? I mean, that's how I got my foot in the door. So after about 9 months, Nick decided that I was pretty good with my hands, and that if he taught me to work in glass, that I could be maybe useful to him at the furnace. So what Nick did that was different, and what I learned from him, is the mixing and melting of colored glass, which allows me to do pieces like that are large cast color. I make oxidized glass, and I make a reduced glass, and I make a copper silver glass that you can see here that's never exactly the same glass twice, and it has beautiful color effects through transmitted light or unreflected light, and that's the glass that's the most fun to make. The other glass that's fun to make are the deeply colored pieces for casting. So I make glass with sculpture in mind as well. I work with designers for commercial installations, either residential or commercial spaces. I do a lot of corporate. I work with a lot of nonprofits to do awards as well as corporate. And then I've got individual collectors that will call me for the wedding gifts.
Scenic Stops is brought to you by WBGU-TV. Support great local programming by giving now at wbgu.org/pledge.